The laughter
By
started before
applying the
Marcus
theory right
Johnson
here,
even
the
reached his
entire
seat.
equation simplifies
Not loud
beautifully.
laughter,
This is the
not the
breakthrough
kind that
moment.
filled a room. It was worse than that. Soft laughter. The kind people thought didn't count. The kind whispered behind hands, carried in looks, stitched into smirks. The kind that followed him like a shadow every time he walked into advanced theoretical mathematics at Crestview University. Marcus kept his head down as he crossed the wide lecture hall. 200 seats, tiered rows, cold white lights, a massive chalkboard stretching across the front wall like a judgment panel. He wore the same faded hoodie he always wore, the same worn sneakers, the same quiet expression. To most people in that room, he didn't belong. And to one man in particular, he was an inconvenience. Professor Richard Hale stood at the front of the hall, chalk in hand, silver hair perfect, suit pressed, posture rigid. 27 years of teaching, published in every major mathematics journal. A man whose recommendations could make careers or erase them. He didn't hide his disdain well. He never had. His eyes tracked Marcus as he moved down the aisle. Then he sighed into the microphone. Unbelievable, Hale muttered, not quietly enough. The room settled, the projector hummed, chalk dust floated in the air. Marcus reached the back row, same seat, far corner, the place where he was least visible. "Mr. Johnson," Hale said suddenly. Every head turned. Marcus froze for half a second, then slowly stood. "Yes, Professor," he said. Hale studied him like an error in a calculation. "Remind me," Hale said, "how you managed to enroll in this course." A few students shifted, a few smiled, a few looked down. I met the prerequisites," Marcus replied calmly. Hale scoffed. "Meeting minimum requirements and belonging here are not the same thing." A ripple of nervous laughter. "This is advanced theory," Hale continued. "This is not remedial algebra. This is not charity. This is not a diversity experiment." The words landed heavy. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but his face remained still. "Tell me," Hale said, tapping the chalk against his palm, "what was your grade last term?" "B+, Marcus answered. Hale smiled thinly. "Exactly." He turned to the board. "For years," Hale said to the class, "students have come into this room thinking effort alone is enough, thinking background doesn't matter, thinking talent is evenly distributed." He wrote a long line of symbols. "Mathematics is ruthless," he continued. "It exposes limits." More symbols, complex, dense, layered. "Today," Hale said, "we will test one." He stepped back, revealing the full equation. Even the top students leaned forward. Whispers spread. "That's impossible. That's not even fair. I've seen that in a doctoral paper." Hale turned back to Marcus. "You," he said, pointing, "come here." Marcus hesitated. "Now." He walked down the steps as hundreds of eyes followed him. Up close, the equation looked even worse. Nested proofs, advanced number theory, elements most undergraduates never encountered. Hale gestured to the board. "Solve it." "A beat." During class," Marcus asked. Hale smiled. "Unless you'd like to admit you don't belong." A few quiet laughs. Marcus looked at the chalk, then at the equation, then at the floor. "I don't think." "Exactly," Hale interrupted. "You don't think, you sit in the back, you submit safe work, you hide in averages." He leaned closer. "And now," Hale said softly, "you're going to show this class why some people admire mathematics, and some people only pretend to." The room was silent. Marcus took the chalk. It felt familiar in his hand. Too familiar. His mind drifted, uninvited, to long nights at a small kitchen table, to pages filled edge to edge, to a voice he barely remembered saying, "Numbers don't lie, but people do." He stared at the first line of the equation. And something shifted. because Marcus Johnson wasn't seeing chaos. He was seeing structure, patterns, intent. He wrote one small mark, then another. Hale's smile widened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hale said, folding his arms, "observe." Marcus continued. The first steps were simple: clarification, rearrangements, foundations. A few students frowned. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The whispers changed. "That's not wrong." "Wait, what is he doing?" Marcus's breathing slowed. The room faded. The lights disappeared. There was only the board. He crossed out an assumption embedded in the problem, then rewrote the entire approach. Hale straightened. "That's enough," he said sharply. "You're wasting time." Marcus didn't stop. He added a substitution Hale had not considered. The left side collapsed into something cleaner. Someone gasped. Hale stepped forward. "Stop," he ordered. Marcus finished the line, then slowly turned. "This equation," Marcus said quietly, "is only impossible if you force it into the wrong framework." Silence. Hale stared at the board, at the transformed structure, at the emerging symmetry, at something he had not seen, something disturbingly familiar. His face tightened. "Where," Hale said slowly, "did you learn to write like that?" Marcus hesitated. "I didn't," he replied. "I learned to think." Hale's jaw clenched. Because the notation was not random. It wasn't common. It wasn't modern. It was old. And it was personal. Hale took a step closer to the board. Then another. Then his hand, almost involuntarily, touched the chalk tray. "No," he whispered. The room didn't hear him. But he did. Because that method, that spacing, that conceptual architecture, only one man had ever worked like that. And that man had vanished 23 years ago. A man Hale had helped erase. Hale turned slowly back to Marcus. His voice was no longer controlled. "What," he said, "is your father's name?" Marcus felt something cold move through him. "I don't know him," Marcus said. "He died when I was 6. Hale's breath caught. "What was his name?" Marcus swallowed. "James," he said, "James Johnson." The chalk slipped from Hale's fingers and shattered. The room held its breath. Because Professor Richard Hale had just recognized the handwriting of a ghost. And that ghost was standing in front of him. The sound of the chalk hitting the floor echoed longer than it should have. Tiny white fragments scattered across the polished wood like shattered bone. No one laughed now. No one whispered. 200 students sat frozen as Professor Richard Hale stared at Marcus Johnson as if he were seeing a man rise from a grave. "James Johnson," Hale repeated under his breath. Marcus stood still, chalk dust clinging faintly to his fingers. He hadn't meant to say the name out loud. He rarely said it at all. His mother avoided it. His grandmother spoke it like a prayer. For Marcus, it was a shadow, present, heavy, undefined. "I asked you a question," Hale said, louder now, sharper. "Where did you learn to write like that?" Marcus looked at the board, at the symbols he hadn't even realized he'd shaped in a way that wasn't taught anymore. "I didn't learn it anywhere," he said. "It's just how it made sense." Hale shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered, "that's not possible." The class waited. Breathing was the only sound. Hale turned back to the board, scanning every line Marcus had written. The substitutions, the structure, the logic path. It wasn't just correct. It was James. The same way James used to compress space between symbols. The same habit of isolating variables before formal proof. The same refusal to follow academic fashion when elegance was clearer. Hale felt something tighten in his chest. "Class dismissed," he said suddenly. A stunned murmur swept the hall. "What?" someone asked. "Now," Hale snapped, "all of you leave." Chairs scraped. Confusion buzzed. Students gathered bags, eyes darting between Marcus and the professor. As the room emptied, many looked back, sensing they were walking away from something unfinished. Within minutes, only Marcus and Hale remained. The door shut. The echo of it felt final. Hale stood rigidly, hands braced on the desk. When he spoke again, the authority in his voice was cracked by something else, something closer to fear. "How old are you?" 19. "And your father died when you were 6. "That's what I was told." Hale closed his eyes. "You didn't know he was a mathematician." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't even know what he did." Hale let out a slow breath. "James Johnson," he said, "was the most gifted theorist I ever met." Marcus's heart thudded. "He was ahead of us," Hale continued. "Ahead of departments, ahead of institutions. He saw patterns we didn't even know how to describe yet." Hale walked to the board and touched one of Marcus's lines. "He wrote like this," he said quietly. "Only one man ever did." Marcus felt the room tilt. "My father cleaned offices," Marcus said instinctively. "That's what my mother said, night shifts, downtown." Hale's lips twitched. "Yes," he said, "he did." Hale turned. "Because after he was removed from academia," Hale said, "that was all he was allowed to do." Marcus stared. "Removed," he repeated. Hale hesitated. "There was a research dispute," he said. "A funding battle, credit disagreements." "Did he steal?" Marcus asked. The question cut deeper than he intended. Hale didn't answer immediately. "He challenged me," Hale said instead. "Publicly, he accused me of building my career on ideas I hadn't earned." Marcus's chest tightened. Was he lying? Hale looked away. "James was difficult," he said. "He didn't understand politics. He didn't know how to protect himself." "So you destroyed him," Marcus said. The word surprised them both. Hale turned sharply. "I did what institutions do," Hale snapped. "I let process take its course." "What process?" Marcus asked. "Whose?" Silence. Hale's jaw flexed. "James lost his position," he said. "His access, his credibility. No university would touch him after that." Marcus felt heat rise behind his eyes. "So he went home," Marcus said slowly, "and he filled notebooks, and he worked alone, and he never stopped." Hale's eyes flicked up. "You've seen his work," he said. Marcus nodded. "I found it when I was 13, he said, "in my grandmother's attic." Hale exhaled. "And you continued it?" "Yes." "How far?" Marcus hesitated. "Far enough to know," he said, "that he wasn't wrong." Hale stiffened. Marcus stepped closer to the board. "This equation," Marcus said, gesturing, "is built on one of his early conjectures, the one no journal would publish." Hale's breath shortened. "I didn't solve your problem," Marcus continued. "I finished his." Hale felt something slip. "Where are the notebooks?" he asked quietly. "At home." "I need to see them." Marcus met his eyes. "No," he said. Hale blinked. "You don't understand." "I do," Marcus interrupted. "You didn't want him seen. You didn't want him credited. And now you're standing in front of what he left behind." Hale's voice dropped. "If those notebooks are real," he said, "they could dismantle 30 years of academic history." Marcus nodded. "They already dismantled my childhood." Silence pressed between them. Hale straightened his jacket, trying to gather authority back around himself. "You will bring them," he said, "tomorrow." Marcus didn't move. "No," he repeated, "I will decide when and how." Hale's eyes darkened. "You think this ends with you embarrassing me in front of a class," he said. This field is not kind to people without protection. Marcus's voice was steady. Neither was the world to my father, he said. He survived it anyway. He picked up his backpack. As he reached the door, Hale spoke once more. You don't know what you're stepping into. Marcus paused, hand on the handle. I've been stepping into it my whole life, he said. I just didn't know its name. He left. And for the first time in decades, Professor Richard Hale stood alone in a room where his past was no longer buried, but waiting. Marcus didn't go back to his dorm. He walked past the library, past the student union, past the bright banners that promised opportunity and excellence and inclusion. He walked until the campus thinned and the streets narrowed, until polished stone gave way to cracked pavement, until Crestview's prestige faded into the neighborhood that never made brochures. By the time he reached his grandmother's house, the sky was bruised purple. The porch light flickered the way it always had. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and old paper. "Baby," his grandmother called, "that you?" Marcus stepped in and closed the door gently behind him. "It's me, Nana." She appeared from the kitchen, small, silver-haired, eyes sharp with a softness the world had never managed to take from her. "You're home early," she said. He nodded. "Class end already." "Something like that." She studied him longer. "What happened?" Marcus hesitated. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out one of the thin black notebooks. The sight of it made her breath hitch. "You went up there," she whispered. "I had to," he said. "He knows." Her shoulders sank. "Who?" "Professor Hale." Her mouth tightened. "That man," she said. "I prayed you'd never cross paths with that man." Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd once needed a phone book to reach. He recognized Dad's work, Marcus said. Not just the math, the way it's written, he knew immediately. His grandmother closed her eyes. "Then the past is done hiding," she said. She moved slowly, sat across from him, placed her hand over his. "I should have told you more," she said. "Your mother wanted to protect you, I wanted to protect her, but silence isn't protection, it's a delay." Marcus swallowed. What really happened to him? She drew a careful breath. "Your father was brilliant," she said, "but brilliance don't mean safety. He was hired at Crestview when you were a baby, one of the youngest faculty ever, and he walked into a world that wasn't built to see him." She paused. "He found something," she continued, "a framework, a way to unify problems people thought were unrelated. It was revolutionary, but when he presented it, his name wasn't the one people remembered." Marcus's fingers curled. "Hale," he said. She nodded. "Richard Hale had money, connections, influence. When your father spoke, they listened politely. When Hale repeated it, they applauded." Marcus felt the pieces align. "He confronted him," she said. "Not quietly, not carefully. He believed truth was enough." She shook her head. "And Hale believed reputation was." "What did Hale do?" Marcus asked. "He questioned your father's competence, his stability, his authorship. He had committees formed, reviews, investigations. They never proved wrongdoing, but they planted doubt." Her eyes darkened. "And doubt is enough to starve a career." Marcus stared at the table. He lost grants, then access, then his position. No school would touch him. They said he was difficult, unreliable, not collaborative. She exhaled. "So he cleaned offices at night, and came home and worked, and wrote, and waited for a world he didn't think he'd live to see." Marcus's throat tightened. "He never talked about it," he said. "He didn't want bitterness to raise you," she replied. "He wanted possibility." She slid the notebook closer to him. And now that possibility walked back into the building that broke him. Marcus opened the notebook. Page after page of dense symbols, margins filled with notes, Questions, corrections, dreams. I finished one of his conjectures today, Marcus said quietly. Her eyes lifted. On the board, he added, in front of Hale. A small, fragile smile touched her face. Then he saw him, she said. Marcus nodded. And he wants these, Marcus said, all of them. She stiffened. You can't give them to him. I won't, Marcus said, not without control. She reached out and cupped his cheek. You don't owe that man anything, she said, but you owe yourself the right to be seen. Marcus looked at her. They'll come after this, he said. Departments, committees, people like him don't lose quietly. She smiled sadly. Your father used to say something, she said. When truth scares powerful people, it's because it finally has teeth. Marcus sat back. The flickering light hummed above them. What if they bury it again? He asked. She shook her head. They can't, she said, because this time the proof is walking. Silence settled. Outside, a siren wailed far away. Inside, history breathed. Marcus closed the notebook. I'm not staying invisible anymore, he said. Her hand tightened around his. Good, she replied, because tomorrow they won't be dealing with a boy in the back row. She leaned forward. They'll be dealing with James Johnson's son. Marcus looked down at the notebooks. Then back up. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was carrying a secret. He felt like he was carrying a responsibility. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. Subject, mandatory academic review meeting. Immediate attendance required. Marcus read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't signed by Professor Hale. It was signed by the dean. By the time Marcus reached campus, the air felt different, quieter. Eyes followed him. Whispers bloomed and died behind hands. Someone had posted a clip from the back row. A few seconds of shaky phone footage. Chalk moving fast. Symbols rearranging. Hale standing stiff beside a board that no longer belonged to him. The video already had thousands of views. Yo, a student murmured as Marcus passed. That was you. Marcus didn't answer. The conference room was cold. A long glass table, 8 chairs, 6 already occupied. The dean sat at the head, 2 department chairs beside him, a university legal advisor, a woman Marcus didn't recognize scrolling on a tablet, and Professor Richard Hale. He didn't look at Marcus when he entered. Marcus Johnson, the dean said, please sit. Marcus did. We're here, the dean continued, because yesterday's class raised concerns about academic integrity, about classroom conduct, and about unauthorized material being presented. Marcus met his eyes. You mean my solution? The dean folded his hands. Professor Hale claims the work you displayed reflects material beyond undergraduate exposure, he said, and possibly beyond legitimate access. Marcus understood. They weren't amazed. They were threatened. Did you receive outside assistance? The dean asked. No. Private tutoring? No. Unauthorized research archives? No. Hale finally spoke. That work, he said, mirrors unpublished frameworks, work that never entered public databases. Marcus looked at him. That's because you made sure they didn't, Marcus said. The legal advisor shifted. Careful, she warned. Marcus breathed once. My father developed that framework, Marcus said, and he wrote it in notebooks you tried to erase. Silence. The woman with the tablet looked up sharply. Hale's jaw tightened. Your father was removed for cause, Hale said. No, Marcus replied. He was removed for inconvenience. The dean raised a hand. Marcus, he said, if you are in possession of materials belonging to Crestview University, they must be disclosed. They don't belong to Crestview, Marcus said. They belong to the man who created them. Hale leaned forward. And if they prove to be mine? He asked quietly. Marcus's eyes didn't waver. Then you won't be afraid of daylight. The tablet woman cleared her throat. I'm Dr. Elaine Porter, she said, independent auditor. I was brought in after last night's video reached certain circles. She tapped her screen. People recognize the structure, she continued. People who haven't stepped foot on this campus in years. Hale stiffened. Former collaborators, she added. Funding boards, retired theorists. One of them forwarded me something this morning. She turned the tablet toward Marcus. It was a scan page. Yellowed. Covered in equations. Marcus felt his breath stop. It was his father's handwriting. I found this in an old grant archive, Dr. Porter said. Submitted 24 years ago, rejected. The lead author was James Johnson. She swiped. And 6 months later, she continued, nearly identical logic appeared in a proposal by Richard Hale. The room shifted. Hale stood. That proves nothing, he said. Ideas evolve. Dr. Porter nodded. They do, she said, but handwriting doesn't, structural habits don't, and intellectual fingerprints are very hard to fake. She faced Marcus. Do you have the rest? She asked. Marcus hesitated. Then he stood. Yes, he said. Hale's eyes flashed. Bring them, the dean said. Marcus shook his head. Not to you, he replied, to people who don't answer to him. Silence thickened. The legal advisor leaned toward the dean and whispered urgently. Dr. Porter straightened. Marcus, she said, there are mathematicians across the country asking who you are. There are institutions requesting review. There are donors asking questions. Hale's voice cut in. He is a student, he said, not a colleague, not a claimant, and certainly not a threat. Marcus looked at him. You already know that's not true, he said. He reached into his backpack, pulled out one notebook, and set it gently on the table. The sound was soft, but it landed like a verdict. This, Marcus said, is one of 12. Hale stared at it like a coiled wire. I will submit them, Marcus continued, to an independent review panel with full forensic authentication, and I will publish my father's framework under his name. Hale laughed sharply. You don't have the authority. I have the proof, Marcus interrupted. Dr. Porter nodded once. And I can arrange that panel, she said. The dean exhaled heavily. Then this is no longer an academic issue, he said. This is an institutional one. Hale sat down slowly. For the first time since Marcus had met him, Hale looked smaller. Not defeated, but exposed. Marcus gathered his bag. This meeting, he said, was never about whether I cheated. He looked around the table. It was about whether you could stop what's coming. He turned to leave. No one stopped him. The story didn't break. It detonated. Within 48 hours, Crestview University was no longer controlling the narrative. The first article came from an academic blog, then a science magazine, then a national outlet, screens filled with headlines that carried both disbelief and hunger. Unknown student solves unpublished theorem in lecture hall. Hidden work of black mathematician resurfaces after 23 years. Did a celebrated professor build his career on stolen genius? Marcus stopped checking after the first dozen. Everywhere he went, people stared, some with awe, some with guilt, some with something that felt like apology, even if no words followed. Dr. Elaine Porter moved fast. An independent review panel was assembled in days, not months. Retired theorists, ethics scholars, 2 forensic document experts, 3 mathematicians who had once worked with James Johnson, and had quietly disappeared from major institutions not long after. The notebooks were transported under chain of custody like evidence. Marcus sat through long sessions in quiet rooms, answering questions about where he found them, when he began studying them, what he understood, what he finished, what he extended. For the first time, adults didn't interrupt. They listened. In one session, an elderly man with shaking hands traced a line in one of the notebooks and whispered, "He was always 10 years ahead of us." Marcus swallowed. "Why didn't anyone fight for him?" Marcus asked. The man didn't look up. "We were afraid," he said, "and fear has a long reach." Across campus, Professor Richard Hale's office lights stayed on late. He released a statement, calm, polished, dense with legal phrasing. He denied theft. He framed similarity as coincidence. He called the situation an unfortunate misinterpretation fueled by internet sensationalism. The university placed him on temporary leave, pending review. His supporters were loud, but they were fewer. In one of the closed-door sessions, Dr. Porter slid a folder across the table. Inside were grant timelines, publication dates, citation trees. "You see this gap," she said. Marcus nodded. "That's where your father disappears," she continued, "and where Hale accelerates." She looked at him. "These notebooks don't just match his early work," she said. "They predate it." Marcus leaned back. "So he didn't just borrow," he said. "He built." Dr. Porter nodded. "And he built a reputation on something he didn't originate." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he felt something steadier than anger. He felt alignment. The panel's preliminary findings were not public. But leaks moved faster than policy. A former Crestview donor withdrew funding. Then another. A graduate group signed an open letter demanding transparency. Faculty began quietly distancing themselves. Hale stopped appearing on campus. At home, Marcus's grandmother watched the news in silence. "They say your father's name again," she murmured. Marcus stood in the doorway. "They're saying it right," he replied. She reached for his hand. "He would be proud," she said, "but he would tell you something." "What?" "That justice is not the same as revenge," she said. "Don't let their fall write your purpose." Marcus nodded. His phone buzzed. "Dr. Porter." "The panel wants you present," she said. "Final session tomorrow." The meeting was held in a neutral building downtown. No university banners. No department walls. Just a long room, a wide table, and 13 people who carried decades of quiet knowledge. Hale was there. He looked older, smaller. He did not meet Marcus's eyes. The lead reviewer spoke. "The forensic analysis confirms the notebooks were written between 1998 and 2003, she said. "The authorship matches James Johnson." She paused. "The frameworks within them precede key developments later attributed to Richard Hale." Hale shifted. "In multiple cases," she continued, "Hale's published work reflects structural replication beyond reasonable coincidence." A murmur moved. "This panel concludes," she said, "that James Johnson's intellectual property was misappropriated and that institutional mechanisms failed to protect him." Silence followed. Then she turned to Marcus. "You," she said, "have extended this work." Marcus inclined his head. "Yes." "With originality," she added, "and clarity." She straightened. "We will be issuing formal findings, recommendations, and referrals." Hale's lawyer leaned close to him. Hale did not respond. When the session adjourned, people stood slowly. Some approached Marcus. Hands were shaken. Thanks were given. One man hugged him without asking. Hale remained seated. As the room thinned, Marcus found himself alone with him. Hale spoke without looking up. "He would have hated this," he said. Marcus answered quietly. "He hated being erased more." Hale's shoulders moved once. "Your talent," Hale said, "could have given you a different path." Marcus met his eyes. "It did," he said. "You just stood in it." He turned away and left Richard Hale with nothing but what remained. The findings were released on a Monday morning. By noon, they were everywhere. The independent review panel's report was detailed, methodical, and impossible to soften. It documented timeline inconsistencies, structural matches, and suppressed submissions. It outlined how James Johnson's early work formed the skeleton of theories later celebrated under Richard Hale's name. By evening, Crestview University had issued its own statement. Professor Richard Hale was terminated. All emeritus privileges revoked. Multiple publications were under formal review. A retraction process had begun. The institution acknowledged systemic failure. For many, it was just another headline. For Marcus, it felt like a door finally closing. On Wednesday, the mathematics building was renamed. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a new bronze plaque installed beside the entrance. The James Johnson Center for Theoretical Mathematics. Marcus stood in front of it alone. Students passed without recognizing him. He didn't mind. Inside, in a room that once held Hale's awards, a different kind of gathering was taking place. Dr. Elaine Porter had assembled a small group, editors from 2 academic journals, a foundation representative, 3 researchers who had once worked with James Johnson. They weren't there to talk about Hale. They were there to talk about the future. "We want to publish the notebooks," one editor said, "annotated, contextualized under your father's name." "And yours," another added, "where you've extended them." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Primary authorship should be his," he said. The men exchanged looks. "That decision alone," one said quietly, "tells us you're ready." They discussed grants, open research initiatives, a public archive so no work like his father's could be buried again. Before the meeting ended, Dr. Porter slid one last envelope across the table. Inside was a letter. It was short, handwritten. It had been found, folded into a faculty file during the investigation. The ink had faded, but the words had not. "To whoever reads this, if my work ever survives me, let it be because truth survived fear. James Johnson." Marcus pressed the page flat with trembling fingers. That evening, he returned to his grandmother's house. She was sitting at the same table. The notebooks were stacked neatly beside her. "They changed the building," she said. "I know. They're publishing him." "I know." She looked up. "They're asking about you on every channel." Marcus smiled faintly. "Let them." She studied him. "What will you do?" Marcus took a breath. "Finish what he started," he said, "and then build what he never got the chance to." Weeks later, Marcus stood at a podium he had never imagined approaching. The hall was full. Not of students. Of scholars. Researchers. Young faces. Old ones. People who had come not for a scandal, but for an introduction. Marcus didn't talk about Hale. He didn't talk about humiliation. He talked about pattern recognition, about access, about the cost of being unseen, and about the responsibility of being known. "My father once wrote," Marcus said, "that truth doesn't need volume, it needs witnesses." He looked out. "I am one," he said, "and so are you." The applause didn't explode. It rose, sustained, earned. Afterward, a first-year student approached him. Nervous, quiet. "Professor, I mean Marcus," he said. "They said you used to sit in the back." Marcus smiled. "I did." "Why?" Marcus considered. "Because I was watching," he said, "and learning who I needed to become." The student nodded slowly and walked away straighter. Later, as the hall emptied, Marcus stood alone at the board. He picked up the chalk, not to prove anything, but to continue. He wrote the first line of a new framework, and beneath it, in smaller letters, he wrote a name: James Johnson.